Welcome back to School of Thought on the Hit the Books channel. This will be a very quick week 2 recap of sorts and then a brief week 3 preview, trying to point out a couple things that may have gone unnoticed by some other people, trying to find small edges wherever I can. Things are, as they do every year, week 3 start to tighten up. This year in particular, and I know this has been something of a hot topic Twitter-wise from what I've seen, but when people are entering the market, whether it's right at the time of openers or if it's later in the week, for me, you'll see, I bet, I'm not doing as much with like the immediate super low limit openers this year, but I am trying to get a couple things in Sunday night when limits are okay. And then, adding progressively during the week. But, it's going to vary by person. For someone like me who does this as a hobby on the side, when I can get my number at a decent limit for me, then that's when I'm going to do it. It would be a different story, of course, if I was running a service, touting, whatever you want to call it. Then sure, it would matter to people following when I enter the market. But there's no right answer to this. And I know this debate, like the CLB bullshit, is just going to rage interminably. But it really does truly vary by person and whatever their specific needs are for when they enter the market. But it was a mixed bag week 2, just as it was in week 1. I will add, though, and this year in particular, certainly relative to years in the past, there have been so few objectively bad openers. I think that's why you saw week 1 that some of these lines that moved a ton got smoked. For the most part, the openers were really solid, and they're only going to continue to get better and sharper. As I've done in the past, usually by early November, coinciding with the start of college basketball season, I will significantly cut my volume. 2 reasons. 1, college basketball, much wider menu of games. First couple weeks of that sport are known to be soft. And that works in tandem with the college football market becoming extremely difficult. So hopefully these next couple weeks will be profitable, and I can start segueing into CBB as we get into early November. But last week, 7-5 on posted plays on BetStamp, where I track everything and have for the last 2+ years. Mentioned EMU plus 21 on this program last week, and I don't really watch the games, so I learn a lot of this stuff after the fact, but I did see that PJ Fleck threw me and every other EMU backer a bone at the very end. That's end of game variance is going to be your friend sometimes, and it'll be worst enemy sometimes. In this case, it worked out. EMU played like dog shit, but got a good number there, closed 19.5, 20 across the board. I believe every number would have covered there where it was pushed at 19. A couple complete dog shit reads. The Bama read was bad. I was attracted to getting a cheap 7, played at a bookmaker, and I think it sat most of the week like a more juice 7, and I kind of said, oh, this is the best of the number, and that was true, but just a bad read in general in the game. Second straight week that I completely whiffed on the North Texas read. Week 1 against Cal, week 2 at the under. I don't know. I'm off this week, not involved with the La Tech game. I know that steamed pretty hard today. I believe RAS hit that. Other bad reads: Oklahoma SMU, no. UTEP, no. K-State under, I went through the box there. I thought that was fine. But 2 big FCS dogs. Portland State was straight situational, coming off of that wretched week 1 skull fucking against Oregon, combined with Wyoming pulling off the big upset over Texas Tech. It's one of those that you say to yourself, man, that is tough to pull the trigger. But it's these situational plays, especially those that are off the radar like this one. Like, I didn't see any discussion during the week of a Wyoming letdown or a Portland State bounce back. So when they're more off the radar, anecdotally, I think the situational plays do a lot better than the more obvious ones that are covered in the mainstream. Like you'll see this week, I'm sure there's some kind of baked in narrative about Texas having a letdown. Well, everyone in the world is going to know about a potential Texas letdown. So that to me is like, that's more baked in. Whereas at Portland State, you're going to find more of an edge there. I don't have the numbers in front of me. That is a pure vibes read, but that's just over the years something I've noticed. Eastern Kentucky, this one was interesting. Had I, if I was still doing write-ups these days, which I don't have time for, or quite frankly, the attention span to do, I would have pointed out that the EKU staff had a lot of connections with Kentucky. The coach worked with Stoops, a whole bunch of connections. So anything above 31, I would have played. Realistically, this should have been closer to a 2-unit play, which I rarely do. But my edge I thought was bigger there than any of the others. Kind of dumb in hindsight to not have gotten more down on that, but it is what it is. I do want to briefly discuss Texas State because I played them for the second straight week. Actually got smoked on the number in week 1 against Baylor. I had, I think, plus 25, and that closed plus 27.5 or something. But I did mention on Twitter early in the offseason, back in April or May, that I thought this team, and a take that I saw elsewhere after the fact too, that this was the new Western Kentucky of 2021, the Bailey Zappi team, where everybody came over from Houston Baptist, and staff and a ton of players, quarterback, his receivers, like, and that kind of thing. And Bill Connolly's talked about this too. You cannot model it. It is unmodelable, to use a non-existent word. So, this week playing Jackson State, we'll have to see where that is. I haven't really been dug into it yet because we won't see a line until probably Friday or Saturday. But it took the books essentially all year to catch up to WKU in 2021. And I think Texas State might be that this year. It's like a Colorado light version, a less extreme Colorado. But in this case, you had almost the entire staff. I think 7 out of 10 assistant coaches came with G.J. Kinney from Incarnate Word to Texas State. And this is like, there's so few big edges these days in college football, but this type of thing, this type of mass transport from one, an FCS program to an FBS program, no traditional modeling. And, I respect a lot of the model guys and the work that they do. And I certainly dig into this kind of stuff on a weekly basis, but this is where, and they'll tell you, this is the limit of models. The Colorado example I tweeted out after the week 1 TCU game, the very famous internet midwit meme, and it's meant to be a joke, but there's a lot of truth to it too. The people who, the dumb squares that I think a lot of us would make fun of, they see Colorado very differently than the people in the middle do, and the people on the other extreme, the smartest people in the room, kind of agree with the squares. Like, holy shit, this team's kind of good. It's just a really fascinating dynamic that combines math and personalities and social engineering. But whatever, moving on. Georgia State too was another one. I know UConn was a fairly popular play. I don't give a shit about, as I've said many times, I don't care about bet percentages or bet splits. I have no idea what the splits are on a game. I don't think they matter. But I do know UConn had some respectable action on it, but I'm just so down on this UConn offense. I did play FIU this week. We'll get into that in a minute, but figure as I did last week, take a look at a couple interesting box score notes that maybe are not obvious at first glance. Penn State, Illinois played over 48, a fairly important number in college football. I believe 4th or 5th most common end game total. So if that were to dip below, I'd probably hit that. If it were to dip below 48, the next key number is 45. Can't see it getting down there, barring some sort of like weather calamity. But Illinois' defense, yes, there was supposed to be a drop-off. It was not supposed to drop off this much. Looking at Brian Freemau's available yards data, which is phenomenal. Illinois is 115th in available yards allowed defensively. Toledo went up and down the field on them. Kansas, who obviously is an electric offense, had no issues. I think 82% or 83% of available yards in that game. This Illinois defense is in trouble. Penn State not showing a whole lot. It's been like a very horizontal attack so far. Aller's ADOT is really low. I just don't think they've wanted to show a whole lot. But they should open it up here. everyone I'm sure remembers 2 weeks ago, James Franklin is not interested in pulling the horses off at the end of the game. So that's notable for side, and that's notable for spread. I'm sorry, for total purposes too. Franklin's done this shit for years, and obviously got a lot of attention because of the high-profile nature of that WVU game in week 1. But he's going to keep pushing. Dude loves to cover as a big favorite, and he loves to try and put points on the board late in the game when it's already in hand. So Illinois, they just don't, without Chase Brown, without some of the guys on the line, offensive line from last year, they're much more pass heavy now. And they can't just play slow ball, ground and pound Bielema, especially if they fall behind early. These are the plays per minute tempos. And I also mentioned this week, by the way, Illinois at 2.33 plays per minute. I think last year they were like 2 or sub 2. And this year, most teams, on average, are running fewer plays because of the clock adjustment. So the fact that they're at 2.33, it's a big jump. Now, they were playing from behind for pretty much the whole Kansas game. And I tweeted out earlier this week, one day, I don't know if it's 5 years, I don't know if it's 10 years, we will have for college football situation neutral pace stats like we have. Well, wait, I don't really bet the NFL, but for you guys who bet the NFL, you have situation neutral pace stats that say when the game is within 7 points or 14 points, this is how fast or slow a particular team is. Because these stats, especially early in the season with all the blowouts and the mismatches, you will get a lot of skewed plays per minute numbers. Teams get up big, they sit on the ball, or they fall behind early and they start speeding up, and it's not their true pace at that point. But I have searched high and low. Please, by all means, if you have access or you know where I can find the situation neutral pace stuff, let me know. I don't think it exists right now. Hopefully it will in the future. We'll get a better idea of true pace. But obviously week by week too, and especially as games become more competitive, that true pace will organically show itself. But right now it's a little bit tough to measure. But anyway, I think this game plays a lot faster than it would have last year when Illinois was super run heavy and wanted to grind everything out. This Penn State offense has some pop for sure. We haven't seen a ton of the explosiveness yet, but they've been so methodical moving the ball down the field. And so is Illinois. I like Altmaier. He's done a nice job so far. I think this one plays faster than the total would suggest. Not going to cover everything. I did want to point out a couple box score notes. The Cincy Pitt. Okay, the Cincy Pitt final was incredibly deceiving. Cincy had a 100% post-game win expectancy. For a game that's, if you looked at the final, you'd say, wow, it was pretty close. It was not. Cincy utterly dominated this game. Pitt had a 22% success rate. Is that partially the Narduzzi-Signetti horror show? Sure, yes, but also the Cincy defense is looking fairly legit. 21% success allowed on standard downs. This was, Pitt hit a few big plays at the end when they were chasing, but for the most part, I mean, second percentile success rate allowed. As I said, Pitt did hit a couple big explosive plays, but look at the EPA without those explosives. They're just non-existent. I don't think this Miami Ohio team has that capability to even hit any 1-2 explosive plays, maybe. But man, this Miami is not an efficient offense. They just, I don't see how they can move the ball up and down the field against the Cincy defense. Did want to check. I was curious about Miami's available yards. Yeah, Miami is 96 in available yards gained, and that includes playing UMass. So I think they're in for a pretty tough time here. Yeah, it's a rivalry game, but I had interest in this. If anywhere around 14, I would have given it some thought in that 16 and a half range. But I still think this closes closer to 17 later in the week. But we'll see where it goes. BYU, Arkansas, not worth mentioning. That number's moved a ton. Army UTSA, I played this one pretty early. Everyone knows the Service Academy double-digit underdog trends. No one needs to repeat those. Just reading the tea leaves, body language vibes on Jeff Taylor from his presser the other day. I think Frank Harris is out, and if he's not out, he's super limited. Something's up with him, something I thought was up with him before this toe injury during the Texas State game last week, but he hasn't looked right from the beginning. Is it no longer having Sakari Franklin? Is it the Corey and Clark also being out? Yeah, that's probably a big part of it. Those two dudes were studs. And right now it's basically just Cephas. But he's also 92nd of 134 guys in ESPN's adjusted QBR. And this is competition adjusted. So this isn't like, this actually has some merit to it. Bottom, 35% of quarterbacks so far. It's been a rough go. And with this toe injury, I don't know if it's turf toe or something like that, but if he's not out, he's certainly not mobile. I think they had to shoot. I thought I read that they shot him up with something. I assume they'll do that again this week, but losing a day of prep, the Friday game, which should be a really slow game, like any Army game, and just the lack of pop in the UTSA pass game right now, I think 11.5. I thought that was way too high. But we'll see. Army, I'm a little skeptical because of the increased pass volume. They're like 79-21 so far run pass. Last week against Delaware State, who's like a bottom 10 FCS team, they were throwing the ball, I assume, kind of experimenting. That's fine. Ultimately, they believe that this changes for the better. Passing the ball occasionally will help them, but man, there's a little bit of a concerning adjustment there away from their true triple option roots. Another box I wanted to point out, and I haven't played this yet, but it's certainly on my radar. Western Kentucky beat Houston Christian, formerly Houston Baptist, by 30. This game was a coin flip. 53% post-game win expectancy. This was the weirdest box score I could find in week 2. Bar none. Weirdest box score. Houston Christian is a terrible FCS team. Bottom 15, bottom 20. They've been dreadful. They've been dreadful other than that crazy Bailey Zappi run in 2020. Horrible offense, horrible defense. They ran WK's defense up a goddamn flagpole. 56% success rate. Ran the ball at will. Passed the ball at will. 46% success on passing downs, like a third and long. Like, this was bizarre. All green offensively. This was, I don't know where this came from. And I know KU's defense has some issues, but to be almost even in yards per play, give up 7 yards a play at home to Houston Christian. Like, man, this is, I think Ohio State gets to 50 at least, especially if there's some quick 3 and outs from the WKU offense. I will say they're supposed to get Malachi Corley, their stud receiver, back this week. They were supposed to get him back last week. I believe he was dressed and didn't play. Precautionary because they were playing a crappy opponent, maybe. I don't know. But he is supposed to be back. If he's in, I'm inclined to play the over more than the side, which is sitting 28 right now. Really would have wanted 63 on the over. I'd probably play that up to 65 if he's in. If he's out, I'd lay the 28. Kyle McCord's hasn't had to do a whole lot, and I know Ohio State's looked underwhelming overall, but his efficiency numbers still look pretty good. I think he's top 20 in this adjusted QBR metric that I just referenced. He is 11th. Yeah, he's looked good so far. They're going to do whatever the hell they want. And the horizontal WKU air raid, I think Jim Knowles has seen that 100 times coming from the Big 12. I can't see that being a huge issue. So I'm inclined to either lay the 28 or to look at the over. Pending Corley's status, he really matters. Explosive receiver. Kind of changes the game for WKU. Other than that, quick hitter notes. Speaking of air raid, Wisconsin gets its second straight air raid opponent with Davis Brandon, Georgia Southern. They saw it last week at Wazoo. A little shaky defensively. The offense, of course, is the bigger issue. You would think for Phil Longo, who wants to run a ton of 4 wide receiver stuff, that he would have some receivers, but yeah, he really doesn't. That's a tough go right now. PFF has them 83rd amongst receiving groups, graded at 83rd right now. They're struggling to separate. Georgia Southern's going to score, This is sitting 19. Does it get to 2021? Maybe. I mean, Helton did it last year. They went to Nebraska and won as big dogs. They've been really feisty with how efficient this offense can be. I still think Wisconsin's inflated. I had Washington State as part of the underdog moneyline round robin last week. I still think Wisconsin looks overvalued. They took some money early in the week. Some group hit them. I forget who. I don't even know if I ever knew. Doesn't matter. Who knows? One other note on the FAU Clemson game. Cade Klubnik right now has amongst 136 quarterbacks qualified on PFF. He has the 7th lowest ADOT, 5.4 average depth of target. So what does that tell you? I mean, the Garrett Riley offense is horizontally inclined for sure, but man, they got nothing going on downfield whatsoever. Absolutely nothing. But Casey Thompson's really struggling for FAU. He is 112th in adjusted QBR. I don't know how FAU scores more than 10 to 14 here. Had a sort of lean on Tom Herman, catching a whole bunch of points and all that. But my bigger edge, I think, is on the under 52 or better. Haven't played it yet, but that's also on the radar for this week. I think that's about it. Obviously, I have a bunch of other leans, but nothing other than the 5 listed that I've actually played so far. But a much shorter, by the way, shorter FCS versus FBS slate this week. I'm sure I'll have 1 or 2 of those, but that's going to obviously die down. Next week's the last of those in any sort of volume as we get into conference play, more so in week 4, week 5. So anyway, that's a wrap for this week. As you already know, subscribe to the Hit the Books channel. Appreciate the support. Check out the other guys on the channel, all doing pretty great work throughout the season. And until next time, take care.